Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Precision Defense Podcast. I'm Brad Jeffers. I'm here with my teammate, Jesse Misko.
Howdy.
How you doing, Jesse?
Pretty good. It's snowing outside, so feels like home.
Yeah. We are excited to have a friend of ours here, an extremely good shooter that most of you all know. Adam, welcome to Athens, Ohio. How are you?
Thank you. Feels like Indiana.
Very close. We've been doing some training. Me and Jesse had talked to Adam during the summer about coming down and spending a weekend with us and doing some training, cross-training a little bit and getting different ideas. So that's what we're in the middle of, having fun, and we wanted to cover this topic. So our topic today is about Dryfire. Jesse, talk to me about the purpose of Dryfire, and Adam, I'll have you let the people know what your purpose of Dryfire is also.
Yeah, so to me, the purpose of Dryfire is to get in those repetitions that we need without spending all the time and money it takes to actually go and live fire. There's so many things you can do dry firing that you can do live fire, but just not in a reasonable way, like changing small little nuances of how you shoot, whether you're over driving the plate or you're coming up just short. It's very easy to fix in dry fire. You're also putting in the time of full stage runs that you can do just 10 minutes a day. You don't have to go to the range and do anything. And that kind of builds up your subconscious, all the pathways in your brain, how that works. And it really helps you refine everything that you do when you go to live fire.
Adam, talk to us.
So I completely agree with Jesse. I think that if everyone had, infinite ammunition and a range in their backyard that could take 3 steps outside and go shoot live fire, I think that live fire gives you every single component of shooting that you need to develop. However, it's not reasonable to have that kind of a circumstance. So therefore, you need to have dry fire to supplement your live fire. And it's almost more so that your live fire is supplementing your dry fire. Your dry fire is where you're building the foundation. And it's extremely efficient for time and resource wise, because I'm saving my trip to the range, I'm saving all of the cost of the ammunition, and I'm in a heated space that's just down the stairs. It's usually in your basement you're dry firing, and you're in more control of the situation, and you can hit it more often. Anyone can spend 10 minutes a day going down and dry firing every day. But hitting the range twice a week, which would be the same amount of time on the gun, is much more difficult for most people.
I think what you guys are talking about there is really interesting. I know in all training, in pretty much all walks of life, our ability or the time that we can focus tightly is limited, right? So if we get outside of our good, solid focus period, sometimes we're doing less good and we're creating less good habits, where dry fire you can certainly do 10 minutes a day before work, after work, or an evening, where if you actually had to load all your bags up, load all your ammo up, head to a range, set up targets up, your energy level could be quite low and also your focus level might even be lower. So then sometimes we're just pulling the trigger, throwing rounds into the bank without really the focus that we would like to have. You guys, focus is key, right? We're talking about, I'm fortunate to be sitting here with an optic and an iron sight world champion in rimfire challenge this year in 2023, and an optic and an iron sight world champion in the world speed shooting competition. So I've got 4 world champions sitting here across the table from me, and you guys know how important the ability to focus tight is, and how unbeneficial it is when you're not focused tight and trying to practice. Talk about that, Adam.
I think it's a lot easier in dry fire to kind of remedy those issues, because you can just walk away from it at any time, and your investment isn't there. I haven't already burned a gas to get to the range. I haven't already packed my ammunition, everything up. You can literally just, if I'm having bad reps, I can go and just walk back upstairs and go do something else. I'll go empty my dishwasher, just do something else that breaks you from that, and you can go back and reset. And if you are staying in that state of I'm in a slump right now in this exact moment, and you just keep trying to brute force through it, you're just reinforcing more bad reps usually. And every rep you do, you're building a foundation that you'll fall back on in a match when pressure mounts. So if you're adding more layers to your foundation that are unstable, you're going to be unstable in the match when you have to fall back on it.
Mm-hmm. And another way I like to look at it is when you're given a list of words and you're told, try to remember these words. You're going to remember the first couple words and the last couple words. You're not going to remember everything in between. So if you dry fire for 10 minutes, you're going to really, that's a very efficient time to do it because you're going to learn from your first few minutes and your last few minutes. And so that time in between really is still meaningful. So, and that's what you can do with dry fire. Whereas some people are lucky enough they can walk down to the range for 10 minutes and shoot and then come back. They have something that a lot of people don't have. So dry fire allows you to
do you guys know anyone that has like their home range? Like,
I've heard of a couple.
Really?
Yeah, that Steve Foster guy.
Steve Foster guy down there, yeah.
Brad Jeffers. Yeah.
So that's good, Jesse.
There's also like if you're dry firing in your house, like what you're saying, you kind of break off and you remember the first and the end. You can compartmentalize your practice too, and you separate into different kinds of practice. So like if I'm going down to dry fire just stages, I probably won't do stages only for the whole duration of while I'm practicing. I'll set some random target arrays up, or you try to just break it up into segments so that way you can remember a greater portion of the time that you're spending, and it also keeps you engaged in what you're doing. Because if you're just going to set up random targets and you're just going to bounce between them for hours, and most people aren't dry firing for hours, but it's to the extent that you are bored and you are not invested and you're not mentally there anymore, you need to break it up and make something exciting and do something different just to keep it rolling. If you get bored and you walk away, you're not practicing anymore.
Yeah. The second you get bored or overly frustrated, you need to stop what you're doing and change. Whether it's going to a different stage, stop dry firing, do something else.
Make a super easy or a super hard stage if you can move your dry fire targets around, or just make it interesting adjacent to shooting. Like sometimes when I'm in kind of a slump or like my mechanical skill is not doing what I want it to do, I'll make a really hard stage on my wall. It's just I'll focus on, I'm going to make this as difficult and as technical as I possibly can. And part of the enjoyment of it is the idea of brainstorming that stage, but then you go in and shoot it and it forces you to work so hard that then when you go back to what you were doing, it feels so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
I like when you talked about compartmentalizing dry fire, and that's something I do a lot, is I may spend 4 or 5 minutes working on my first shot so that when that gun comes up, my dot's in the center, my optic and my dot's on the center of the plate. And I can isolate that and work on that for a few minutes, which kind of talks about what Jesse was, not spend too much time on that. And then I might change and work on what is my cadence and try to build my cadence really consistently. And then I might also know one really important thing for me for dry fire is building my muscle memory so that I drive the dot to the target and I'm not having to make a lot of fine adjustments with my sight when it gets there. So I can compartmentalize those things, and it saves me a lot of time loading ammo, loading guns, going to the range. Even though I've got a range here, it still takes a lot of time to prepare for the range. I'm tired. I got 15 minutes in me where I can focus. I can go do that. It's productive, and then get away from it.
Yeah, I guess a question that I have is what do we achieve from dry fire? Because that still ties into the purpose of dry fire. Like why do we dry fire? What key components can we use from that to apply to our matches?
Yeah, this is good. This is important.
So what Jesse had mentioned it earlier, you're kind of creating a pattern. And when we say pattern, it's essentially your subconscious formula for how do I get the gun from point A to point B and make the shot and move on. And you're kind of taking a stage in portions of, I want to get to this plate at this efficiency, and then you do that for every single stage and it just kind of translates. That's how the same people who are shooting really well in Steel Challenge are shooting really well in Rimfire Challenge also. The results stack out pretty much the same every time when you look at and compare the two matches. But what you're doing in dry fire is essentially you are doing everything except the recoil and the literal accuracy. Is if you're calling your shots and you're trying to make as many variables similar to how you do it in live match, that's all still building that pattern, that foundation for you to make more accurate and efficient transitions when you go back to live fire. And you don't need to do that in live fire. Like if you did it in live fire, you're training other stuff like recoil management and shot calling, but no one can afford to do that long term for their entire practice schedule. And like in the short term, I could spend 500 rounds, shooting at targets over and over in live fire, and I'd get about the same amount. I'd get a little tiny bit more for my shot calling and my recoil, but it's not worth the cost. Like I can do that. I can go home and do that for free and with less time, and I have more time left over. I can practice more things. So I think the sum of increased skill is higher generally in dry fire compared to live fire.
And to kind of tie into what Adam was saying, if you look at it like a pie chart, while you're live firing, there's a lot of pieces to the pie. You have recoil management, shot calling, all the patterns you're doing, whereas in live fire, you're taking away some of those pieces and giving more area to those core skills. You're taking away recoil. You're taking away all your, whether it's windy outside, whether there's noise, all that stuff. You're taking that away, and you're isolating your core skills. What you're doing in dry fire is more important than recoil management. Recoil management is fairly trivial because the plates are so far apart. So by isolating all that, that's where we want to go.
Okay, so now I'm going to be like way less into the weeds here. And we're all in different situations. You two are goal-driven. You want to win world championships. And I'm going to say, I know Jesse well enough to say this, you guys want to be as good as you can be. I think that's more important to you than the actual results, right? So looking at it like in just a really practical or ideology, why do you pick your gun up and go to the basement and dry fire, Adam?
Because I need to. I won't get what I want done if I don't go and do it. It's not even a question of should I spend my time doing this. It's I have to, or I won't get to where I need to go.
Yeah, I think all three of us here want the end result so much, which is just simply to shoot faster, that everything that we need to do, whether it's practice, cleaning guns, all that kind of stuff, it's just part of the process. It needs to be done.
So I think a little summary of what you're saying too is, even though it's not fun, even though there's going to be times you dread it, it is part of your process to be great. And very easy for me to sit here and say, you guys are great shooters because you followed your process and the work you've put in to do that. So, and I think it makes it less miserable knowing what the reward is at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
I'll also know that I'm going to be a lot more miserable if I show up to the match unprepared. And my expectations are still the same as if I had been practicing. And I show up there, I don't have that confidence. And I'm like, I haven't been practicing. I don't know how I'm going to do. And I try to shoot like I've been practicing, and it's just not going to work. It's going to be frustrating.
Yeah, if you go to a match, you shoot poorly and you're frustrated, look back at what you did before this match and have a reality check for yourself. Did you practice enough? Were you confident enough? Was it worth it to go to the match without all that preparation?
Something that I found in all sports or all competition venues, the more prepared you are, the less nervous you'll be.
Oh, yeah.
That does not mean you won't be excited or anxious, but you won't be nervous. And there is a huge difference between excitement, butterflies, anxiousness, and nerves. And certainly the most prepared people are the less nervous.
And it removes some of the doubt, too. Like, if I show up to a match and I know that I've practiced and I know I've done what I'm supposed to do, I can trust myself to do what I'm supposed to do on command because I already have the foundation that's strong. And that's a huge... that definitely helps overcome that, adrenaline while you're getting up to the line.
Don't you think it's also easier to live with results?
Oh, yeah,
when you
definitely.
put the time and energy and you've prepared, you know what you've done, what you can do. So the next thing I'm going to get to that ties into Dryfire a little bit is situational things for all of us. Everyone in the Steel Challenge world, the Rimfire Challenge world, most people listening to this podcast shoot steel. we all have different situations that we can all use as excuses. And certainly, you guys are in situations where some people certainly would not call it advantageous. Jesse, you live in Wisconsin. You take a big break, and I think a lot of that is because you need that mental break. So when you dive in, you have your energy again. But certainly, you don't get to do much live fire and choose not to do a lot of live fire for a 4 or 5 month period. Therefore, dry fire becomes very important to you when it is time to start your grind. You're forced to do that. You're not using that as an excuse. Well, I'm not going to be very good for 5 months because I can't shoot. There's no matches in my area.
Yeah, so winter really gives me a good excuse to stop shooting and to reset. However, with how early some of the area matches is, with how early Worlds was last year, I hit a point where that sense of I need to start was about in February. But of course, February in Wisconsin's crappy, really cold. There's 3 feet of snow at the range. There's no way I can reasonably go there and shoot. So that's when dry fire is really a last resort, but a very good option anyways. It helps to start off with dry fire at the beginning of the season because I can build all those, again, core skills without wasting ammo. Because if I go to the range and try to shoot before dry firing, the gun feels foreign, all the recoil's foreign. Just seeing what I want to see is foreign to me because I haven't done it for so long. If I can take at least a month to build up those core skills again, when I finally go live fire, it's like I've never stopped shooting. So,
yeah, that's good. So Adam's has a completely different situation. I've got to talk to Adam about this the last day or so, which is truly mind-blowing to me. So, and I get a lot of the comments because I do have a little range here at the house. A lot of times you hear that, well, you're fast because you get to practice all the time, which that certainly can be an advantage. But the interesting thing is, Adam, you don't get live fire. You literally hardly ever shoot live fire. And when you do, it's 2 personal plates that you take out to range and set up that are not in any pattern. You're not shooting smoke and hope. You're not shooting outer limits. You're not shooting any of those. You're in a situation where if you're going to shoot, it's going to be in your basement. Now, you have to take dry fire to a completely different level. Instead of spending 10 minutes, you're spending hours to achieve a goal, and you don't use that as an excuse, and then you back it up with world championships. Talk to me about that situation, how you've had to make that commitment to achieve the phenomenal things without any range.
So the range that I have, that I have access to, it's like a gravel pit about 30 minutes out from my house. So for me, the only time that I can go there pretty much is on weekends, and that's when I'm shooting matches. So I can't. There's just not a reasonable means for me to get there because I have classes in the evening for apprenticeship. So I'll be out of my house from 6:30 in the morning to about 9 p.m. I'll get home, and I'll try to get practice in after that. Where there was times where I'd get home early from work, I'd take a nap, and I'd go and I'd get back home at 9, and I'd practice for 3 hours and get up again at 6 a.m.
That's dry fire practice. That's not live fire.
Yes. So the range is not open at any time where I have any time to go. And even if I did, I never have invested in the steel to do it because I can't get there to use the steel if I bought it. So what's difficult there is that you can't figure out your limits necessarily of what you can and can't get away with when you start pushing your speedometer to its max, where you're kind of outside of your comfort zone and you can't get used to it. So I've had to instead go and do dry fire, and I dry fire a very, very high amount for the amount of a lot of time on the gun for the window that I'm dry firing. And what that allows me to do is it's given me much higher consistency because I can't push it. It's just I've put more into my foundation of this is what I'm shooting stably versus this is what I'm shooting volatilely, and try to get a little bit faster in my comfort zone.
Yeah, and I can kind of back that up where when I practice, I'm not practicing quite the same as Adam, whereas I'm not practicing for pure consistency, same thing every time. I'm practicing for speed, but I can shoot at the same level because while I'm going to miss more, I can pull it back with the faster strings that I do have.
And I kind of bank on it. Like, so when Jessica and I compete, we're very, very close in time typically. I shoot very close to about the same time every match. But the way that and it's a little bit slower than he is when he's clean. So when he shoots really well, you're going to smoke me. But what's happening is when...
Smoke's probably the wrong word. Maybe edge you.
But a second is a lot in that amount. But it was like, the way that I can get ahead is I'm going to shoot everything at a baseline time of where I'm very comfortable and where I know that I won't, not necessarily that I won't make mistakes, but I won't make them often enough to really cost me. And when I do get stuff to line up well, you get your first 4 strings clean and they're all pretty good times. I'm shooting like 95% speed. I can crank it up to 110 and push it, and that's where I get ahead and where I can gain some time there. But I'm not really, it's a smaller amount that I'm gaining, but I'm not losing it anywhere else. So I'm only getting positive. Whereas some of the other people we're shooting around, they're going up and down compared to where I'm at that have more access to more live fire.
So when we talk about your two situations, which are in some ways similar, so mine's completely different. I'm in an area where I don't really get to shoot matches. So I shoot very few matches compared to most, people that are, pretty proficient in the Steel Challenge world. I have a 4-stage match that you can shoot 1 gun in. That's an hour and 20 minutes away. I have another evening match where you can shoot 2 guns. It's 4 stages. And then really it's a long ways. It's 2.5 hours to 3 hours to shoot an 8-stage match. So I don't get to shoot a lot of matches. Plus I'm older, so I've got a lot more family commitments that I really enjoy. I like going to church with my wife on Sunday, so that eliminates that day often. So really, I don't get to shoot matches where I'm like, once you're in season, you're shooting a match almost every weekend.
Yeah, well, because that's the only time that I can test. I'll go out and I try to shoot at least 1 local and 1 major a month typically for the rate that I'm competing. So it's usually, I think the last 3 years I've shot 10 major matches, like state or above. And then I'll go and shoot usually 2 locals a month, where I'll make sure I'm getting locals before majors because I want to make sure that what I'm doing is dry fire is right and what's working. Because if you cheat yourself in dry fire, you're going to cheat yourself out of consistency.
So this year, I have to try to create a match-like environment at my own range, which is tricky, but you have to find ways to do that. And the point I'm trying to make is, we all have different environments. Like, find a way to not make an excuse for what isn't good for you and find your way to get around it, which you two have been great at, right? So I think that should be encouraging to a lot of people out there, trying. It's really easy to say, hey, I don't have this, or I'm in this situation, or I don't have that. If it's important enough, there are certainly ways to overcome all those things, and that's where dry fire can be a really key component to allow you to bridge those challenges.
And the people that want it the most are going to find the most out of the norm ways to accomplish it. Like, it's not like, if you want it bad enough, you're not telling other people, I can't do it because of this. It's a totally different kind of personality of, I'm going to do it anyway. And there's no situation that's going to stop me. I'm going to find a way around this.
Yeah, this is kind of getting into the mental side of it, but if you start giving yourself excuses, you don't want it enough.
Yeah.
You need to change your mental state to where excuses are irrelevant. You do what you have to do.
And there aren't many people that shoot that way. Like, most people that are shooting Steel Challengers as a population, most people are going out and just shooting club matches and
having fun.
And and of course, and
there's nothing
that's
wrong
why
with that.
that's why we are all here too.
Yeah.
However, there are people that they don't see the return on it for putting as much, obviously, as we're putting in, and that's okay.
Yes.
That if that's not what you are built for, that's the way you think. Doing it is not going to make you happy.
Mm-hmm. I go bowling because it's fun, not because I'm good at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Well, hey, I think we're going to wrap that up. Fellas, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your information and your willingness to share that. Adam, we look forward to bouncing you back on a podcast again soon and getting more of your ideas.
Right on.
And Jesse, anything you want to say in closing?
Go out and dry fire because you need to, not because you want to.